Today is experiment day. I took this cover down to the machine shop and we machined the face here where the injector pump goes on, and it was warped. Not as I expected to be warped across here, like the whole shebang was warped, but just this flange here. Looking at the inside, you can see it's relatively weak. You know, it's got a few sort of half-assed ribs here, but it's not really all that strong for a heavy pump. The surprising thing was this engine, this fits this way around, and the high spots were here, and the low spots were here. So that meant, in effect, let's see if I can get this camera right, the pump was tipped like that. Now, what I'm going to do today, I'm going to fit this, and there's no oil pump in, there's nothing in it. And we measured this, this is parallel, everything's great, but this was out. So is that our problem, why the belts are going? I don't know, let's find out. Doing. We've just cleaned off this face. We know this is parallel. Let's turn this around. And now we're going to. We did one just as a test, and it was a little bit out. It was 4,000th of an inch out. So we're going to clamp this and do a very light skim over this one and see what this one's like as a comparison, just to see if that is the problem. So it does make a bit of noise, this machine. I'm not sure if it picks up, and also this camera keeps cutting out. So once we do this, I'll set this up and we'll do another pass and see what happens. So I've mounted the pump onto the housing, and I've torqued all the bolts down evenly and correctly on the cover here. And I put the bracket on here, and you can see that the bolts are loose, but there's a slip bush inside that is supposed to move forward and tighten up so this doesn't bend. But watch this. Watch this very, very carefully, because I haven't got two cameras, so I'm going to have to edit this together. But I'm just going to slowly tighten this up by hand. Can you see what's happening? Especially here. You see this bit? It isn't moving. But what is moving is the bracket here. See? This bracket is pulling in towards this, which means this is trying to push this way. What was it? Every action's got an equal and opposite reaction. Just to prove this, I've set up a gauge at the front. So I'm going to replicate this again. I'm going to back this off. Alright, you can see that. It's all backed off. And now I'm going to move the camera. So I've set up a dial test indicator, and this is in thousandths of an inch because I haven't got a metric one, and it's on the furthest extremity of the flange of the pump. I'm going to put a pulley on, but I wanted you to observe what happens at the same time when I tighten that nut back up. So we've just done a scene with the tightening up the bracket, and the bracket wasn't moving, but watch what happens when I tighten up the pump. I'll zoom in a bit. Right, so I'm going to start to tighten up the bracket. Right, we're just starting to nip it up now. Look at that. Did you hear it go? Did you hear it click? It clicked into place, that bushing. But when I tighten it, it's 1/1000 of an inch off. But if we observe where the bushing is, we've got no space to tighten it up anymore. I'll show you. I'll move the camera again. So when we heard that click, that was the bushing moving forwards. But if you can see here now, the head is against this bushing, the fixed bushing in black. So it can't go anywhere else. That pump can't go anywhere else, but it's still 1/1000 of an inch out. So I'm going to set this back again. I'm just going to back this off. It's a pity I haven't got two cameras, but never mind. I'm going to back this off and see where that gauge goes. Yep, goes back to 0. But this is not working. So I'm just wondering if I can back these bolts off here and pull this way. If not, I'll machine that black piece back a bit, and so we've got a bit more room to work. But first of all, I'm going to put the pulley on the drive of the injector pump. So this is interesting. Here you can see the bush has pulled through the fixed bush here, this sliding bush, and is now flush with the end. However, I'm just going to try and zoom out a bit. I might lose a bit of focus here. I'll just wait for it to catch up. There she goes. Even though the bush is flush, I can still get, what's that there? 28,000th of an inch between the back of the bush and the mounting for the pump. Alright, so watch what happens if I start to tighten this up. So what I've done is I've set the DTI on the pulley, but I put the pulley backwards, so we've got a nice lip for it to touch. So I'm going to put the bolt back in the hole. It's got a 28,000th of an inch gap. I'm going to zoom into the gauge. I've set it to 0, and let's see what it does. Because I'm going to go over and over this until we get this right. Because there's something not quite right with this, and I think it's the way that this is set up. So I've got my bolt in, and now I'm going to start to tighten it up. And there you can see how it kicked the pump forwards. Can you see? So what's that? That's almost, I think it's almost 3,000ths of an inch. So you can see quite clearly on this gauge here, when I tighten up the pulley, it's pushing it 3,000ths of an inch further forwards. Not good at all. So I think that we've got to do something to this bracket. Now, I've got a theory, just hold on. Well, that theory didn't work. What I thought was I'll slacken off these two bolts off here and let the bracket go further forwards, except it won't move. So what I'm thinking now is that maybe these split bushings here are just too short. I don't really want to grind off anything of this because it will defeat the object of the exercise. I think I trip down to the machine shop and get two longer bushings made, really long bushings made, because it won't change any difference to the setup, but it will allow it to move in and out a lot easier. And it's a lot easier than making different setups for the front. Now if I keep that gauge on there, that's at 0 again, we'll test it later. So I just got back from a machine shop, and we took these old bushes out here, which were too short. We made them just a little bit longer, and we split them. They're a 14mm by, well, they're 14mm by 13mm, I do believe. I'm not sure. Maybe not. But split them, put them in, and now they move quite nicely backwards and forwards. So if we look at the gauge now, so there's the gauge. So I'm going to tighten these bolts up. I've got it set to 0 and see what it does now. That's the top one. And that's the bottom one. Doesn't move at all. So I am pleased with that. It's not moving on the brackets. Seems to be the problem. So I don't know. I'm going to give this a go. I'm sure it's right. I mean, you know, even with 1/1000 of an inch on here, it's not moving at all, whereas before it was 3/1000 of an inch, so the bushings obviously did the job. The next course of action is to run it on the starter motor once we get it all together and see what the belt actually looks like. But when we were looking at the front of the engine, I don't want to, well, let's move the camera back a bit. Let's move the camera back a bit. Look at my oil pan. So what we came to the conclusion was the camshaft can't move because it's quite rigid, because that can't move backwards and forwards. The crankshaft can't move because that's rigid. The only thing that could move is like this. And what I'm starting to understand is, yes, the casings do flex, but I'm thinking that once that has been remachined, once the pump is bolted on and this has got the newer type of bracket with longer bushings in, this piece at the top here, I think we're going to be good, because you see, this is the old bracket with that fastened on, and it had slots in this way and it had big holes in here, and they're sort of like, well, I don't know, clearance holes for 3/8, or what would 3/8 be? I don't know, 14mm-ish. But the bolts were only like this, so you had movement all the time. I think there's something set up wrong somewhere. So I don't know, but let's try it and see if it works. And if it does work, well, I'll go down to the other machine shop and get a few thousand of these bushes made, and then you know, we could sell them on a website pretty cheap, because it seems to be an answer. Because this isn't moving now, but we did see it moving before. And one sort of regret that I have is that I didn't keep an original pulley, original housing. I haven't got any more, but we've had them both machined up. But I think now that is the answer. So we've salvaged it. We've salvaged the pump and the cover. We're going to build this back up, and then that's another thing done. We'll put a belt on and we'll try it. So this Land Rover is going to be so much better. We'll talk to you later. Bye.